And I think Juan took my outline as well. Well, good morning. It is a beautiful Lord's Day. We're grateful that we can spend this time in worship together. Thank you for being here, being part of our worship. There are times in our life when we may look to the sky and say, why? Why is this happening to me? What is going on? And we have questions, and sometimes we expect answers, and we're like, please, Lord, give me some direction. Give me some guidance. What's the deal? And this is something that is prevalent throughout our life, throughout our society. And so there are times when we question God. And usually these questions are centered around our suffering. We have problems with our family. We have problems with our health. We have problems in the world, with our government, and we suffer. And so we look to God for an answer. That seems legitimate, seems like a good thing to do. It's a natural response. And so the question that we often ask God is, why am I suffering? It's a valid question. We have, throughout history, we've asked this question. We've looked at the things that are happening in our world, and we're perplexed. We are puzzled. We can't figure out how this all fits together. Maybe we're angry. There are different emotions that crop up. Maybe we're resentful. And so there are times in our life when we look to God and we ask this question. This is probably one of the atheists' they think this is their greatest question. This is their greatest dilemma that they can present to a Christian. They say, see, suffering, if there is a God, why would he allow that? If this is real, if suffering is real, and we can all relate to that, and if God is this all-powerful God, he is omnipotent, we've even made up a word, he is omnibenevolent, why would he permit so much pain and suffering in the world? And they stop and they say, aha, I've got you. And we look at them. Well, it's like, there's a couple fatal flaws in this so-called question, this problem that's been presented to us. You see, God's power is limited. Now, this is interesting. Listen, hear me out. God's power is limited by his attributes. You see, God is holy. He is all holy. And he cannot have evil or darkness in his presence. And number two, God cannot lie. So there are things that God cannot do. And one of them is lying. And his power is limited by his goodness. Never attempt to isolate these divine attributes from God. The assumption that is made that suffering is somehow diametrically opposed to goodness, all we have to do is look at a couple examples in the scripture. You think about the Apostle Paul, 2 Corinthians chapter 11. He goes in detail of his suffering. His suffering was immense. Beaten, left stoned and left for dead. We suffer, but I've never suffered to that extent. Shipwrecked. A viper hanging off his hand. Only good snake? Dead snake. It's like a viper? And then everybody thought, well, he's obviously a criminal, obviously a sinner. He's fixing to die. They were going to watch him perish right in front of him. Then he didn't die. He suffered. And if Paul's not enough, if Paul's not a great enough example of suffering and being in the whole realm the idea of God, think about Jesus. A little later this morning, we'll gather around the table. We'll remember the death of Jesus. It wasn't a peaceful death, dying in bed as an old man, taking his last breath. Oh no, this was a violent death, and was perpetrated by violent people. They wanted Jesus to suffer immensely for hours on the cross, suffering, and then breathing his last. Oh yes, God allows suffering. Even Jesus, absolutely pure, sinless. And God said, this is the plan. This baffled everyone. This baffled Satan. It baffled the angels. God is allowing suffering, his own son, not just a little bit, but grievous, terrible suffering. So before we ask these questions, before we throw in the towel and say, well, he must not exist because here I am suffering, I want us to consider the man Job. Job is the epitome of a man that endured everything that could possibly go wrong in a lifetime. And he endured it all. He was wealthy, like us. We're wealthy. He was like us. We have children. He was like us. He had a bank account. He had savings. He had dreams and visions of his children as he grew old, growing up and watching them flourish, just like us. And God said, consider my servant Job. Satan says, yeah, if I take away his wealth, he'll turn. You have problems with finances? You have trouble paying the rent? You have trouble with the doctor bills, medication? You have trouble? Yeah, Job, he was wealthy. And Satan says, I'll take it all away. And he did. Job had children. Imagine all of your children dying in one catastrophe. A house collapsing on your children as they celebrate a birthday or some other event in their life, and all of your children perish in one moment. Happened to Job. Oh, children shouldn't die before the parents. The parents are supposed to die first. Oh yeah, that's the natural order of things. Oh no, not with Job. All of his children perished. His wife, Mrs. Job, cursed God and die. That was her advice. When she saw all of this happening to her husband, obviously God's not listening. Obviously there is no God. Obviously all these things came to her, and she just said, curse God and die. Huh. But Job remained faithful. And then Satan took away his health. Oh, as we get older, things stop working. Things that used to work don't work. We used to be able to do things we can't do anymore. There's all sorts of problems, all sorts of pain, all sorts of suffering. We find Job in an ash pit with boils all over his body, scraping to give him some relief of the itch and the pain. Yeah, when we talk about suffering, we forget that we're not the first ones to suffer. And I've never suffered like that. And here's what Job did. His friends came to comfort him, and his friends were pretty much good for nothing. But his friends came to comfort him, and here's what Job challenged. Here's the question or the challenge that Job had. In Job chapter 13, beginning about verse 17, he's looking to heaven. He is speaking to God. And this is the challenge that Job lays down. He says this in verse 17, "Listen carefully to my speech. Let my declaration fill your ears. Behold, now I have prepared my case, and I know I will be vindicated. Who will contend with me? For then I will be silent and die." And he goes on to say, "Please, Lord, listen to me." Job wants to take God to court. Okay. When you defend yourself in court, you have a fool for a client. That's the saying. And it's true. You defend yourself in court, you're fixing to lose. Because you're a fool. Job called God in to court. Oof. Job would be the prosecutor. And Job thought he had a clear picture of how earth's affairs ought to be administered. Job would be his defense attorney on his own behalf. Be careful. Be careful when you rise up to that level of arrogance, thinking you know so many things, when in fact God knows all. And as the diatribe between his friends and himself continues through the book of Job, finally God's had enough. And God has this to say to Job: brace yourself like a man. You want to question me? You want to come into my courtroom? You want to question me? I will question you, and you will answer me. And I challenge you with Google and with AI and with all the things that are available in our present era. See if you can answer all of these questions. A barrage of questions. It's like that bumper sticker: get in, be quiet, and hold on. That's God. Imagine a final exam from God. Let's look at verses 1 through 3 of chapter 38 of Job. The Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, "Who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge?" My version says, "Now gird up your loins like a man." That's an odd phrase, isn't it? "And I'll ask you, and you will instruct me." Roughly 60 questions are directed at Job. And if we fast forward to the end, Job goes 0 for 60. All right, and you've probably failed a few tests in your life. You've probably been to school a time or two, and you've probably had exams before, but you've probably never went 0 for 60. You probably at least guessed one right. Oh, not Job. He goes 0 for 60 questions. Get in, be quiet, and hold on. In verse 4, it begins. "Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding." There's all sorts of theories about how the earth is suspended, how it's built, and all the things that used to be part of science. Trust the science. Remember, trust the science. It's like, couldn't figure it out. They still can't. You still can't figure out how it all fits, how it all holds together. Where were you foundation of the earth. Verse 5 and 6, who set its measurements, since you know, or who stretched the line on it? Oh, it's impressive. You think about what's on our coasts. East Coast, West Coast, the Gulf, bodies of water. Look down at verse 11. Who enclosed the sea with doors? When bursting forth, it went forth from the womb. When I made a cloud its garment, and thick darkness its swaddling band, I placed boundaries on it. I set a bolt and doors, and I said, thus far you shall come, but no farther. Here shall your proud waves stop. Think about all the blather about how the oceans are going to rise and they're going to flood. It's like, what's the Bible say again? Oh, that's right. It's not just here in Job. It's in Acts chapter 17. There's a boundary. There's a limit. God knows what it is. Job, with his mouth open, couldn't believe these questions. Remember, God says, you want to bring me to court? Let's start with some simple questions. It continues, verse 12, have you ever in your life commanded the morning and caused the dawn to know its place, that it should make hold of the ends of the earth and the wicked shaken out of it? Have you ever? We have a song. There's a song from a musical, I think, Sunrise, Sunset. We bank on it. On our phones now, it tells us exactly the minute the sun will rise and when it will set. It's not happenstance. Who does that? How does that work? The idea of questioning God. Verse 16, have you entered into the springs of the sea? Have you walked in the recesses of the deep? Have the gates of death been revealed to you? Have you seen the gates of deep darkness? Have you understood the expanse of the earth? Tell me if you know it all. Be careful. Sometimes our arrogance gets in our way. You see, the gates of death, Hades is the Greek word, Sheol is the Hebrew word. There's a place. Who controls that? Where are our loved ones when they perish, when they die? Where do they go? (22-30), we can relate to this. Have you entered the storehouses of the snow, or have you seen the storehouses of the hail, which I have reserved for the time of darkness or distress, for the day of war and battle? How's that weather been lately? Not all beautiful sunrises and sunsets. I think it was just yesterday, maybe been the day before, there was 3 feet of hail in Denver. They had to get snow plows out. Where does that come from? Well, we know how the process. Lots of moisture gets pushed up into way up into the atmosphere because it's so cold up there. That moisture freezes, comes crashing down. Right? Have you been? Do you know where all that comes from? I love as you just scan through question after question. What surprises me and what amazes me is about verse 31. Can you bind the chains of Pleiades or loose the cords of Orion? Can you lead forth a constellation in its season and guide the bear with her satellites? This is an old book. Job is an old book. May have been the first book written in the Bible. We don't exactly know when it was written. It's an old book. He's calling out constellations. If we didn't live in Fort Worth, if we lived out in the country somewhere where there wasn't all this light pollution at the nighttime, we could lay down on our back and look at the sky, and we could find these constellations. And we still call them the same thing. You know that belt of Orion? I can find that. And I'm an idiot. I can find that one. I can find the Big Dipper. I know where the North Star is. See, when God says, here's the arrangement of the stars. I put them in place. I know their name. How many stars are there, God? Oh, that's right. We have no idea. And yet the scripture tells us he names them all and knows them by name. He created them. He put them in the exact spot where they're supposed to be. By the word of his power. Oh, yes. God is going all out on Job. The questions don't stop. They continue. Verse 39, he jumps over to wildlife. Can you hunt the prey for the lion or satisfy the appetite of the young lions when they crouch in their dens and lie in wait in their lair? Who prepares for the raven its nourishment when its young cry to God and wander about without food? Do you observe the calving of the deer? Can you count the months they fulfill, or do you know the time they give birth? They kneel down, they bring forth their young, and they get rid of the labor pains. The offspring comes strong, they grow up in the open field. God feeds the great and the small. Procreation, even unattended. Who set out the wild donkey? Who set the wild donkey free? Loose the bonds of the swift donkey, to whom I gave the wilderness for a home, the salt land for his dwelling place. Freedom, survival. He goes on to talk about the wild ox, independent and strong, the idiot bird. Verse 13, the ostrich. That's a strange bird. God's got a sense of humor. There's a farm. We were driving, trying to remember where it was, but there's a farm here in Texas. And we drove, we saw this big fence. We thought, oh, wonder what's behind there. We drove a little further. It was like 24 ostriches. So we looked it up. We said, what good's that? Well, apparently they have things that are viable. They're worth something. They are a strange looking animal. The ostrich. Verse 19 to 25, the war horse. 39, verse 26 to 30, the hawk and the eagles. One day a doorbell rang. One of our neighbors came over and said, there's an injured hawk in your flower bed. Well, that's weird. So I went out to my flower bed. Sure enough, there's a hawk looking at me. And I thought, what am I going to do with that? So we got a video, I think, of me capturing this thing. Should be on the funniest videos, but it's like, I took a sheet, walked toward him, and he just sit there and looked at me. I grabbed them. They're lighter than you think. They look pretty big, but they're not very heavy. Their bones are hollow. Makes them able to fly. Put him in a little cage and called the Department of Wildlife. They came and rescued him. We think that he healed and came back because we see this same looking hawk, but we hope that's him. But when God created this kind, verse 26 to 30 in chapter 29, is it by your understanding that the hawk soars, stretching his wings toward the south? Is it your command that the eagle mounts up and makes his nest on high on the cliffs? He dwells and lodges upon a rocky crag, an inaccessible place. From there he spies out food. His eyes see it from afar. His young ones also suck up the blood, and where the slain are, there he is. Yes, God loves and sustains all of these created creatures. And you think about these animals. It's a bizarre kingdom, the animal kingdom. We're still finding things. It's like, how did that? Who put that together? Sometimes the question is, why did he put it like that? See, when Job comes to God, God talks about this animal kingdom. This then becomes a major problem for Job. Job was speechless. Job didn't have a response. Chapter 40. Will the fault finder contend with the Almighty? Let him who reproves God answer it. This is the proper response. Chapter 40, verse 4. Behold, I am insignificant. What can I reply to thee? I lay my hand on my mouth. Once I have spoken, I will not answer. Even twice, I will add no more. But God's not done. You riled him up. You riled up God, Job, and he's going to let you have it. Now, here's the second barrel. First barrel, pretty tough. Here's the second barrel on a double barrel. Chapter 40, verse 15, he brings into view some massive creatures. Behold now, Behemoth, which I made as well as you. He eats grass like an ox. Behold now his strength in his loins and his power in the muscles in his belly. He bends his tail like a cedar. The sinews of his thighs are knit together. His bones are tubes of bronze. His limbs are like bars of iron. What is that? Well, the word dinosaur wasn't even invented till 1840s. And so this is a possible reference to a dinosaur. We've found these bones, and it seems very similar to this description. Job must have seen something like this, must have been a witness to this type of creature. And you think about some of the places where we find evidence of these particular animals. Here's a close-up of a column in the jungle over there in the east, Cambodia. It's like these are carved in stone, these images. And these images were built 1,000 years before we ever found the first dinosaur bone. It's like, a monstrous creature. Chapter 41, basically the entire chapter of chapter 41 is something called the Leviathan. And you think about the Leviathan, and it's some sea creature. Does Leviathan plead with you? Does he speak softly with you? Can you play with him? Can you make him your child's pet? See, wisdom and power are companion attributes of God. And when God demonstrates his power, his wisdom is then accepted. These creatures, whatever they may be, reveals God's power. They're made by God. It also reveals just how small we are. These were massive creatures, suffering. All started God calling, or with Job calling God into court. And he says, why am I suffering? God answers him, and sometimes his answer is not something we want to hear. Suffering displays all too clearly our weakness. There are some positive attributes to suffering. It displays our weakness, and it sharpens our awareness of what's really valuable. Sometimes suffering exhibits something that, it produces something that's really quite beautiful. And one is why suffering caused him to search for the meaning in life. Sometimes suffering drives us to our knees, and we seek God, maybe for the first time in our life. That can be a positive attribute for suffering. Suffering at times brings families together, even those who have been estranged for years. Suffering accentuates the value of precious friendships. These moral and social qualities, we're able to show compassion for others. When we can say, I can relate. I too have suffered. Having experienced similar situations in our own lives, we're able to empathize with others. With all of these questions, God has this in his mind. God has answered Job in a very bizarre way, but his answer, it causes us, or should cause us, to adore him. You think about the adoration, the songs that we sang this morning about Jesus and his love for us and our love for him. You think about the adoration that we have for God and the display of his love. He calls for submission. And it's not because God needs anything from us. He says, my ways are better than your ways. It's really as simple as that. You can do it your way. You can do it. That won't end well. It's a bad choice. It's yours, but it's a bad one. Try it God's way. The Lord's command comes from his love for us. These commands, they're not made to make our life miserable. God's commands are made for our life to be great, to have an abundant life, a spiritually abundant life as well as a physically abundant life. He wants us to be encouraged and helpful as we go on this journey. When we surrender to his will, then joy can come into our life in spite of suffering. And suffering sometimes just gives us that extra little bit of push to be joyful when the New Testament tells us to rejoice always. Again, I say rejoice. See, Jesus came and he said, follow me. I'm going God's way. Follow me. And so many did. Others chose not to. They chose their way. What's your choice? What's your choice today? God's way? Your way. Receive his forgiveness. Obey his commands. God's way is the right way. Take that next exit. Get off this highway. It's called my way. Get on God's narrow path. Come to Jesus today in obedient faith. Come to him. And then when you ask God these questions, be ready for an answer. He's got an answer. Obey him today. Well, together we stand and sing the song that's been selected for us.